This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. Joan and Janet are subtle energy empaths who navigate consciousness. Their passion is to support you in your evolution. As consciousness, we are all one. One mind, one heart, free of all limitations. Experience this reality with us and discover how it can make a difference in your daily living. Join us in a state of grace as we explore, with warmth and humor, this thing we call life. Now, here are Joan Newcomb and Janet Barrett.
Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. We're your co-hosts, Joan Newcomb, coming to you from Tacoma, Washington, and my partner, Janet Barrett, coming to you from Portland, Oregon.
Hello, everyone. How nice to be with you again.
We have a very interesting show today. We are going to be talking about consciousness and choosing to quantum leap.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so it just so happened that this morning we have just gone through a very powerful eclipse. At least physically it's gone through a powerful eclipse, and energetically we're still going to feel it for the next month to 6 months to 2 years. And we actually have another one in 2 weeks. And astrology tells us that these are powerful portals of change. However, as consciousness, we can choose to quantum leap at any time. So Stay tuned, because we're going to be talking about how to utilize the energy for your personal shift in a whole new level of reality.
And here's an invitation to go deeper with us, to connect with us beyond the show at our website, www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. And there you can follow along. We have all these podcasts. We've been doing this show now for a couple of years. And you'll find information about our blogs. Both Joan and I write, me on Monday, her on Friday, about what's going on and how we're noticing the world. And always great information there. And about our meetups. Joan does hers up in the Puget Sound area, and I do mine here in Portland, Oregon. And our sessions, because we both do interactive sessions on Skype and phone with clients. So Joan's got all that great Facebook connection stuff. So take it away, Joan.
All right. Well, I'm pretty certain that if you find us on Conscious Conversations with JoanandJanet.com, that there are links to our Facebook pages. But in case you're already on Facebook and you want to find us, surprise, surprise, you look for Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and you will find our group, and join the group and join the fun. If you want to find Janet, Janet is there as Janet Barrett. And I am there as Joan Newcomb. So we made it really complicated for you. Twitter is another whole other thing altogether. Twitter would not let us put Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. It was too long for Twitter.
Too long.
It was more than 140 characters, and which is now 280. But anyhow, so we're at Joan and Janet on Twitter. Janet is Janet Beyond, because she likes to keep things mysterious. And then I am Joan Newcomb on Twitter. So that's JoanNewcomb on Twitter, because I have no imagination. And then if you want to find us on YouTube, guess what?
What? Yeah. More Conscious Conversations, Joan and Janet.
No, not more Conscious Conversations. You're going to confuse people. Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And you'll find us on YouTube. You can binge listen to us on YouTube. I'm on YouTube as well. And you can find my weekly podcasts, my weekly videos on YouTube on our website, ConsciousConversationsWithJoanandJanet.com.
And you have meetups in Tacoma coming up, right?
I do. We didn't talk up your meetups, however. I'll really quick give a nod to that, which is you hold your meetups in your lovely home in Portland near Reed College, and on Tuesday nights and on Thursday afternoons. Right. And
wonderful things happen here.
Oh, amazing things happen. Amazing things happen, but she has very soft couches for you to fall onto.
really.
And then I have meetups around the Puget Sound, and I have one coming up this weekend in Tacoma at the George O. Swayze Library, which is on 6th Avenue going towards Jackson and Bridgeport, I think. So it's at the library there. It is from 3 to 5 p.m. this Saturday, February the 3rd.
Yeah, you can't get too messy at the library, people falling down.
No, I can't have people falling down. So what we do is that we have conscious conversations, which means that we talk, but then we also do walk around through doors to parallel universes.
Oh, how fun.
Just to keep things interesting.
Yeah. Lots of things. Well, we've been noticing. Are we ready to talk, or did you talk about your transformational game workshops?
Oh, well, if they want to find that, then go to my website, joan-newcomb.com.
Okay. So what is the quantum leap, right? And there was a great TV show with Scott Bakula. I remembered. Okay. But quantum leaps are these abrupt changes that can happen when you're in quantum world, and things change, and they change from one state to another state. And so it's also a huge, often sudden increase or change in something. And the time is right, astrologically, we're hearing, for this sort of thing to happen, with portals opening and closing and doing whatever they do. And also as consciousness, we generate this all the time. And when we use consciousness technologies and we're in heart-centered awareness, the field of unified consciousness, which is what the show is all about, we choose to make quantum leaps. We choose to empower ourselves to make a difference. And we don't only have to wait to when the moons and the suns and the stars are all in positions. Those are definitely wonderful states. And if you don't address those kind of states, if it's not in your reference, this is another way that information makes it work. Because, in astrology, it seems to me, Joan, there's always things opening and closing and ellipses and eclipses and all that kind of good stuff. There's always opportunity for something.
Yes. And I like to think of astrology as, cosmic weather. It's part of the components that make up this particular manifestation, creation, hologram. And you can dance with the weather or not dance with the weather. And as consciousness, you can play with it. You can align your growth with it. But also as consciousness, you can choose to create your own quantum leaps. And they happen every moment. Every step you take can take you into a new quantum leap if you really want that much intense change.
And we know how some people are programmed for it, right? I mean, they really embrace the dynamics, the vitality of bouncing around, and that's real in their world. And then for some of us, that's a much more subtle approach, but change still happens. And it's just how you have encoded yourself to allow for something different to happen. And there's no judgments in any of that. Sometimes quantum leaps can be very, very subtle, I think. It's just a term, it's language, to indicate that something different's happened that's probably unexpected, because that's what abruptness is. It's like, oh, wasn't planning on that. So when you're in a mindset that you're creating these opportunities, you're in a whole different relation to that dynamic. So what have we been noticing? What you've been noticing in your world, Joan? How's this playing out?
I've noticed a couple of different things. I know for myself, it feels like a sea change. And
sea change? You mean like an ocean?
Yeah, it's a term that I picked up from a movie when I was in middle school. But it's also, if you think of the term that how the sea can change things, but I also think of it as a deep and profound transformation that is that can shift you from one experience or one state to the next state, and the next state may be unrecognizable to the previous state. Mm-hmm. And I can feel that going on the inside, and it feels subtle, but it feels very, very profound. And what I notice reflected in people around me is that some people are just it's just really affecting it's really affecting their nerves. It's really it's making them anxious. It's making them nervous.
Sensitive to things.
Exactly. Very hypersensitive. I guess the other thing I would say with all this is to be easy with yourself, to be gentle with yourself with these kind of changes. And there's something about creating quantum leaps as consciousness where you don't have to completely destroy everything. It's like burning your bridges, raising your life to the ground, divorcing your husband of 46 years or whatever. You don't have to do that. It becomes a very subtle and gentle change where everything falls into place.
Yeah, it does. So everybody just notice and be in that field of unified consciousness, heart-centered awareness. And you'll notice that in that place, what we're talking about is you can feel that happening. There's the drama is way, 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 way low. And you just start to register ease. And, it was like last night in group. Really core stuff is showing up and inviting change because that's what shows up and that's what we do with it. And we get done and everyone's like, whoa, something's different. And there's just this subtleness in a very profound way because, sometimes our little minds can't grapple what's happening, which is just fine. That's a great place to be. And you just go, well, something's more relaxed. And we just allow that to be present. It's not about having to do things or feel things or judge things because when you're doing those, you're really tracking in that sense of self, that surface. And consciousness just is this deep, expansive ocean, the sea that Joan's talking about, and invites all of that. So I look forward to, I think, Joan, you asked me this morning, how did I sleep last night? And I'm like, well, it was a bumpy sea here and there and turbulent. It was up. So I was tracking stuff and it wasn't really in a conscious place. And it doesn't need to be conscious sometimes. It just needs to, oh, okay, things are going on. And I'm sure I'll come to them at some point. So.
Yeah. In fact, that actually sounds like a good approach to things because then you're not resistant.
Right.
You're allowing things to unfold as they are unfolding.
Well, lately I'm really coming to appreciate, okay, I don't have to have an answer because I don't have to have a question because that's might be more mind wanting to be reassured. And it's just like, well, as I experience myself more as consciousness, the need to challenge myself shows up when I need to challenge myself, when it's interesting, when something is going to happen, something can happen. And since I am in charge as consciousness and allowing myself to experience this human interface and check in with myself, it's a lot less stressful and things are going to happen. And my approach to them is to look more forward to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There's something else about this particular eclipse. And what I am noticing with this eclipse, I'm going back to that because it just makes people very sort of spaced out, scattered, and completely unconscious about time.
Mm. Yeah.
So, my, look at the time. We need to take a break for a commercial break. So, just a reminder that you're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and we are going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be talking more about consciousness and choosing the quantum leap when we come right back.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye. Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
That was fun listening to that music. Yeah. Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and I'm your host, Joan Newcomb, and I am along here with Janet Barrett.
Thank you. You were telling us what this particular thing that happened last night was about. What are those dynamics?
The thing that happened last night, which was actually just a few hours ago, it was in the wee hours of the morning here in the Pacific Northwest, was the eclipse. It was a blue moon eclipse, January 31st, 2018, and it was a full moon eclipse, and that usually brings culminations and endings.
And it's feminine too, right?
There was a whole aspect to this particular one that was affecting Ceres and the moon, and had topics to do with difference between traditional motherhood and non-traditional motherhood, and women and feelings. And actually, I would say more than just women and feelings. It's like the divine feminine that is in all of us. Right. Because there's so much more going on now with that energy. It's almost inaccurate to describe it as feminine, because then it gets assigned a binary role. Yeah. And if you notice what's going along in the world today is that more and more people are identifying as transgender. They're identifying as no gender. They've gone beyond the definition, and that is partly or a lotly or entirely due to this expansion of consciousness coming into form, and those sort of definitions breaking down. And part of what is going on astrologically with this particular eclipse that happened was, I just see it was a portal for greater consciousness to come into form, and for those sorts of old, limiting, antiquated, outdated concepts to disintegrate within us as well. And if you think of those as structures to our own identity, it's going to create a lot of major shifts and change within us.
Because the old words don't work so much. Yep. And I think this is how people are acting out, and I don't mean anything about that other than they're looking to be not confined by a label. And words are so powerful, and they're so helpful, and then they're not. There's a point where you're just in reaction to the word, and you're no longer in reaction to really what it's addressing. And I think that's part of what these quantum leaps that we've been noticing lately are showing up as. People looking to say, enough. This isn't me. This doesn't fit me. And let me go find me. And so they'll do this, or they'll do that, or they'll do this, or they'll do that. And they feel like they're taking control of that inner story and maybe becoming more in line with it. Now, I think like anything, humans organize being present by judgments, by making choices and having to make a decision, because it's about being alive and being in a physical body and being safe. And we can appreciate that. But as consciousness, that we're much more than that. We're not using those references necessarily. And we come up against the way people have taken something and then as a morphic field builds around it, as it becomes something bigger than just between you and I, and it starts to get all this energy behind it. Now you have something that maybe is not what was ever created in the first place. It's like a good story that becomes this great myth. And there's a kernel of truth, maybe, but the rest of it is all, hoopla in there.
Well, how I would say that is how we interpret things through our linear body's perception, and our linear body's only going to see it through these limitations. So immediately when you're trying to even talk about this incredible expansion that we're all experiencing, it's going to come out through these limiting concepts. There's going to be a distortion, and kind of like what you said, it's like a game of telephone where you pass the story around the circle, and by the time it comes to the end, it's like something completely different than what started.
Right.
So we're all trying to describe what is going on here, and it's kind of amusing to see the different ways people are talking about it.
Right. And it's, we want to say, we want to fall into the terminology of right and wrong. And right there, that's where that self.
That's wrong.
Itself.
That's wrong. Don't fall into that.
And so you go, okay, how do I? So choices are choices, right? And as consciousness, we're making choices. And we appreciate how, let me do that. Let me try that. Well, let me try that. And it's kind of like you go from flower to flower, like bees picking up sweetness. And, so it's the parameters we play in, right? This is the time when we're bringing into more awareness that we are making choices. And how do you want to frame things? And I always talk about the framework of things and reframing. And also, what comes to mind, Joan, when you were sharing there was, well, what would be helpful, right? How to make this easier? And one thing that came up in group last night is fault. When you're putting something in the context of a fault, which is the right or wrong. And because, people use different languages and stuff. That is self. That's an ego response. That is not consciousness, because consciousness doesn't care. And so I'm looking for ways to help our listeners. What are the words you use that maybe have become something that they were not always useful? So, I don't know where I was going with that. It's just
well,
it's the moon. I can blame the moon.
Yes, you can blame the moon.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's actually a very good illustration of what, when you're pointing your finger at these different things and you're blaming these different things, you've got three fingers pointing back at yourself.
Yeah.
But it's another example of limitations and the right and wrong, black and white. These things are wrong, these things are right. And all of that only exists in the physical level plane. It exists in this particular physical reality. It's actually part of the construct of this planet, which is a planet of dichotomy. Therefore, there's got to be something right if there's something wrong. There's got to be something black if something is light, kind of thing. Duality. Thank you for coming up with a fancy word for it. And as consciousness, it's all neutral. As consciousness, it's all an experience. Consciousness has this sense of amusement about everything, and there's actually a sense of enjoyment or even excitement about everything.
I think it's where you position yourself from. As you're explaining, judgment is important to making those discernments to keep ourselves safe and to navigate in whatever we're ascribing as reality. But what we have to be aware of is that we are always in many realities at the same time. And if I'm coming from that position, you can certainly be a spiritual being and hold both those places. But where your comfort is, you recognize yourself as that human, that's that thing. And then, and then I have spiritual endeavors. We're referencing it in the opposite. We're saying we are consciousness experiencing life as that self. And what happens in that realignment and that reordering, because we all deal with real world stuff. And this is not about being airy-fairy or in denial or any of those things. It's about where you're starting your orientation from. And you can do that from a place that others are affecting me and are more powerful. Or you can do that from a place of, there's a force, here's a dynamic, there's an interaction. And you can hear the neutral in it. You can hear that there's no emotion in it. You can hear, And that's, I think, what happens as humans is where we get confused sometimes. That we use the word fault. They did something, but really what we're looking at is from the place of something happened here, and there it started, and there it was, and now I can track it. And there is no fault. There are just these choices that got made along the way that set something into motion. So that's interesting. And that does relate to quantum leaping. It's how you set up.
Take us back. What were we talking about? We quantum leaped out of this topic, and now we're quantum leaping back in. Okay, great.
Well, that is quantum leaping. It's where your reference is. See, so if you've got, it really isn't a quantum leap. That's only a descriptive of a dynamic. Something happens. Something unexpected happens. And as a result, things are different.
Right.
And that's, at essence, what life can be about. And as consciousness, that's the constant framework you're in. So it's not something you save for Sunday. It's not something that you do once a year. It's something that is a process that's available all the time. That is potential being sparked into something.
I'm feeling like talking about parallel universes.
Oh, okay.
Even though we've talked about them before, and it's actually something I always introduce at my meetups, is the whole concept of parallel universes. But I think about how just by stepping into a parallel universe, you've made a quantum leap.
Yeah. It can hit people that way, huh? And it can hit hard or it can hit soft. Yeah,
right, because it can be very subtle and very profound. So what's your description of a parallel universe?
Oh, goodness. Parallel universe. Well, it's kind of like looking in a mirror on a mirror, and you see all these reflections of yourself, and they're all lined up. And this is what I'm always sharing with the students, is if I look about, and I'm in there's something that's I'm noticing, so I want to explore it. So I look in the mirror, and I can see that there's one that's not quite lined up. That has something to do with this. And then I form that connection, and stuff happens. And it's me in a parallel universe. And I like the visual in the mirror because you can see me in all my different, in all my different realities. Each one is a reality set, a parallel life. And I just tag the one or the all. I mean, because I'm not going to judge this. A lot of times, if I use that, I can see that there's a couple of fields that are interacting with this one. And since energy flows in all directions, it can be me to that life over there that has information that's in a parallel place that will make a difference in the connection, or it's coming in, I'm in this present reality being influenced by what is in that reality. And I collapse those two together. So it's different ways of interacting with what I'm perceiving as myself in different events simultaneously going on. Does that work?
Yes, and yes, and you just taught them 2-pointing. So
Yeah.
I don't go that far in my meetups. So in my meetups, actually, what I do in my meetups is there's a couple of different ways to explain it, but the way that has been useful most recently is to think of something like a video game, and how when you start to play a game, if you turn left, you set into motion a whole series of events that are completely different than if you go right. And so as you playing the game, you can play it as many times as possible, and you never repeat your experience. Mm-hmm. However, and that's you playing the game here on the planet Earth in your linear timeline body, with the big perspective that it's just you with this one choice to go in that direction. When you step back to view it as consciousness, all those possibilities are running at the same time. And
so you go left and you also go right. And you also go straight ahead. And you go 30 degrees. Yeah, right.
So that's how I say, so you have to step out of your identification as this one body, one personality aspect. And the other thing is that they're not they're not rigid pathways. You can shift between one and the other. So you brought up a very useful example of, that means that you have had every possible experience. You as consciousness within all your myriad parallel selves have had different experiences. And if you feel lacking in your current state, you can connect to an aspect of yourself that had it. I like to also think of it that you have made no mistakes. So, for instance,
wow! Talk about taking the judgment out. Good for you.
So let's say I didn't get into Stanford. Of course, I also didn't apply to Stanford, but I didn't get into Stanford. And there's a parallel self that did, especially now because I just said so. But so or I didn't date that person, or I did date that person, or I did move to San Francisco, or I didn't move to San Francisco. All those different examples, all of those happen at once, but on a very, bringing it down to an easier to conceive of reality is as you're walking through your day, you're stepping into different states in different universes. So for instance, if you're at a very boring staff meeting, you can, excuse yourself and pretend to go to the restroom. And when you leave the meeting room, go around the corner, come back again and step into a different universe, and you'll have a different staff meeting that you'll be stepping into. All the same people, but it'll be a lot more fun. People will be laughing. And I've even had this in relationship where, there's been a lot of conflict in a relationship. And by stepping into parallel universes, the personality changed. And, and started getting along with that boss or whatever. Or there was a woman who actually stepped into a reality where her boss quit.
I have had that. Yes.
Or stepped into the reality where there were, previously you were stuck at the airport in Atlanta and the last plane to Seattle had already left, and then you step into a reality where, hey, there's one more plane and you've got a ticket. So those are things can happen. You can create your own miracles with that kind of thing. So that's another example of the idea of quantum leaping between different universes, between different states, between different levels of awareness.
You know, years ago, there was that great movie, What the Bleep Do You Know? And what was one of the core points they were looking to illustrate was the basketball scene. And the little boy had a basketball, and there were 100 other basketballs, or 99 other basketballs. And that's where it really hooked for me, I think, that awareness about parallel stuff, is that in choosing one of those 100 balls, the rest disappeared. And that was your choice. And then all of it else receded. Because, you know, in what you were describing also in the game is, I don't know anyone who doesn't play those games who doesn't get involved in it. They get intense. They get committed. They get passionate. And however they're playing it. And what happens when you do that, you localize your focus so much you lose sight of all the other stuff. And when something happens, and let's say you have to die, or whatever the setup is, or you can't go back, and you know you're going to die, but you're not going to go there. And I've seen people with that, and it's like they're so attached. And it's like, now just a minute, this is a game that I've set up, and by making that choice way back there, this is where I find myself. And it's just the way we can get attached to things and committed. And none of that's good, bad, or ugly. It's just what we notice ourselves participating in. So, do you think you could be a different body, Joan? How does that work? You know what I mean? If you're parallel, are you going to see yourself in that other life? Does it look like exactly like you, or does it look different? Does that form look different or something?
Well, I would say we don't go there at the library. And the thing is, you know, you remember our dear friend Mark Dunn, and he had this experience where he woke up one day and he was in an alternate Seattle. Yeah. And you know, there are slightly different signs on the I-5 and everything. And then later on in the day, it sort of faded back to being normal. But I would say that I don't invite people to kind of freak out with a first perspective. And so the thing is as consciousness, you are in every body, and as consciousness, you are everybody. And if you are seeking to step into another body, there's some judgment about the body you're in.
Yeah, right.
And that's not consciousness.
Right.
So you're playing. You're playing with the form you've got, and the parallel selves of the form you've got. You're not. There's another word for stepping into other people's bodies. But
well, it's kind of interesting. You know, we have the male, female within us, both. Right. Yes. And whatever is showing up as in your physical world is because that's the genetic material is more, turned on. But that other self. So I wonder, I've never done that, and I'm sure people can take this stuff all kinds of places, and I'm sure people already do who do use these kind of tools and stuff. And noticing, oh, well, there's me as a man. Oh, wouldn't that be interesting? And where that could be helpful. Because I can see that those traits that I'm going to, and this plays with the gender stuff, but in a different way. It's not saying you have to be this, this, and this. I notice in myself that sometimes I handle information different than my husband does. And there are times when I'd like to take his approach. And is it that far off? No, it's just, oh, okay, that's a degree of hormone. All right, so let me see what it's like to have a little more of that. Doesn't mean I have to become a man. It just means that I can pick up the quality of what it is that I've deemed useful in my experience in being. And we do that all the time. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I would have to hang out with a lot of women and see what their perspective is, because my entire life is men and growing up as men. So it's like, well, that's not hard to do. But
yeah,
it's, this reminds me of a conversation I had recently that had to do with past lives. And from a linear perspective, past lives make sense because that means there are lives before this one, and that means there are lives that after this one.
Yes.
And I have started getting more of a sense of time is being more like lasagna. And in
slightly wet,
slightly wet, but
wavy.
different layers. I'm spinach one layer, and I'm so and because there's no time or space as consciousness, there is awareness filtered through all the layers to consciousness. All of the time, all the lifetimes are happening at once and instantaneously, and so we're not, we're not a Pope Francis the 49th in a future lifetime, and we're not, a prostitute in Jerusalem in a past life. All of those experiences are happening at the same time. And that's another way of accessing, different possibilities or different awarenesses of those kind of experiences.
Go ahead.
Just also hit me, and I'm obviously over caffeinated at this point, but it just hit me that as it's not a linear progression of you and your personal previous lifetimes either. It's as consciousness, you've experienced all of it, and you are experiencing all of it.
Okay, so a couple thoughts. I was taken with the lasagna that's instantly cooked because there's no time or place. And I went, oh, that's how that manifests, because there's no time and place in that reality. Oh, I love that. Okay. So that was the one thing. The other thing is what you're just mentioning is, I've seen with clients, and we're exploring something, and I became aware that this was information from the past. We'll give it that distinction. But it was a projection that whoever that was of the future. And that my guy standing next to me was the projection from that seemingly in the past, but it was happening concurrently at the same time. And you go, whoa. And you just open yourself to allowing myself not to be limited, because that's self. So even when I use the word allow, that's the self opening up to quantum information, right? That's consciousness. And so you get to hear your words, and you look to be congruent and consistent. And it was like, wow, he's in this experience out of something that is still active and is no longer in his reality anymore. He's showing up in this reality this way. And so it was a different take. It wasn't quite so parallel, but it was a different way where time was messy. And, when you're open and opportunities or your norm and potential is always active, and you don't hold a judgment about how something shows up, then something can show up. And you can go, whoa. We do a lot of whoa, and our whoa is often sit on the sofa, fall back into the sofa kind of whoaing. And it's always fun.
Well, we've sort of meandered into the topic about time, and I have lots to say about time, but the first thing I have to say about time is that it is time to stop for a commercial break. So stay tuned, because we're talking about consciousness and choosing the quantum leap when we come right back.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye. Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. We are talking about consciousness and choosing the quantum leap.
Yeah.
Hello, consciousness calling. Consciousness is calling.
Yep. You choose. It's nice to see everything as an opportunity and live my life that way. I have much more interesting, fascinating life. You know, I can get excited about the bug on the window. So. And that just has as much value as my husband wanting his dinner, to be quite honest. There are different priorities involved, but the fascination...
It's like, Janet, you're sitting here looking at a bug on the window and you haven't cooked dinner?
Yeah, really. Priority, you know. But that's why, because it is the fascination, you know, with what shows up and what by inviting that bug into my awareness, what happens within me, you know. And sometimes we can track the bug and I can feel the bug and, you know, you can do all those things. And how to be constructive, how is it useful? Well, makes me a little more open to my world, I think.
What's fascinating about this, and it's just so far from choosing a quantum leap, I can't believe it, but anyhow, is to realize that the bug is a sentient being and a creation of consciousness. It has its own consciousness, and then you think about everything that is alive has its own consciousness and is the experience of consciousness.
Well, maybe it's connected to quantum leaping, which is fine if we don't always see the connection. It is about anything, is because their sense of time in the world is going to be much different than mine, I would presume. Yeah, I presume. And I love watching nature shows and how creatures are, and because it's so outside my reference of what being in my body is like. And so it is a quantum leap because it says a huge, often sudden increase or change in something in my awareness. That's why it's quantum leap. Who pictures himself as a bug, right? And what that world is and models that. And how that could be useful in bringing that awareness back into me, I don't know. I don't say that it has to be right at hand to have that information or that answer. But I have a feeling by being able to embrace that, something wonderful could come from that awareness at some point. I'm not keeping track.
There's a television show called Westworld, and I've only watched like a couple of shows because it was just way too violent for me. But the idea is that, you know, you go, very wealthy people go into these experiences, and everyone there are robots, and so they're not real except that they've got sentience occurring. And then when people start thinking about this reality being an illusion, they start thinking that everybody else is not real and I am real. And, like I explained with the consciousness of a beetle or bug, I think of it as much more infinitely complex than that, in that everyone is real, everyone is having an experience, everything is consciousness. It's a creation of consciousness, and all possibilities exist within this consciousness. So it's, if you try to wrap your head around it, your brain would explode. And what you were talking about is just really appreciating the experience in the moment, which is really focusing right down to that awareness. And that's really what we're all about, is the experience. But consciousness is here to have this experience.
It's a party, man. So
it is a party.
We're getting on our time.
Right. Well, so here's where to party with us after the show. Here's where the after party is. It is at Conscious Conversations with JoanandJanet.com. And you can listen to our past podcasts there. You can also read our blogs. Janet and I write blogs each week. You can find out more about our meetups. All our most recent meetups are posted there. Janet does hers in Portland. I do mine all around the Puget Sound. You can find out about our sessions. Janet does her sessions by Skype, by phone, in person, and I do mine by Skype and by phone and Zoom. I guess you do yours by Zoom now as well. And then we are also on lots of social media. We're on Facebook. You'll find us on Facebook. Look for the show's name, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. You can look for Janet Barrett. You can find me, Joan Newcomb. Find us on Twitter at Joan and Janet, at Joan Newcomb, and at Janet Beyond. And you can subscribe to us on YouTube, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet on YouTube. And you can find me on YouTube, Joan Newcomb. And I have a meetup in Tacoma this Saturday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It is at the Swayze Library on 6th Avenue. Come find us in the meeting room. Anything else, Janet?
Well, I'd like to thank people who have joined me on LinkedIn, asked to be, I don't even know those words, but everyone on LinkedIn, thank you so very much. I really appreciate that. And the only computer work I don't do on anything are my consciousness cookies, and you can even get those on Twitter. And those are daily, and then posting the blog I write every week. So you won't really hear a lot from me, but except for important content. There you go. And just thank you all. It's great. And I got a new groups that are going to be interactive over Zoom starting in a couple of weeks. So if you'd like information about that, contact me at janetandbeyond.com, and I'll get you some information. That'll all be posted in a couple of weeks, but let me know you're interested, and we'll see what wonder can happen.
That reminds me to let people know that if you do have anything you would like to hear us talk about, if you have any ideas for show topics, we're very open to it. Email us at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. It's always a delight to be with you, Joan, and Cameron, our sound engineer, and just appreciate the state of creativity that's open.
Yes, and I appreciate all our listeners, because it doesn't matter whether you're catching us live or catching us on a podcast, whether it's now or in this imaginary future. You are helping to co-create this experience right here in the now, because there's no time or space as consciousness, like we've been talking about. So we'd like to thank you so much. We have been talking, and we're going to keep talking, but Cameron's going to cut us off very soon. So tune in next week, same time, same channels.
Bye, everyone. Enjoy life today.
You've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And thanks so much for helping to co-create the show, no matter if you're listening live or on demand. You energetically contribute to our collective experience. Joan and Janet love to hear from you and invite you to email your comments and ideas for them to explore each week. Contact them at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Tune in next week for another great show, and until then, keep enjoying this wonderful adventure we call life.